Hello there. Can you believe it? Boris is eyeing up making the you-know-what compulsory. The cat is now well and truly out of the bag. There is no going back. At last night's press conference to announce the England-wide imposition of Plan B, that many people think is OTT at the present, during that press conference, the Prime Minister Boris Johnson said that we can't keep going on with ad hoc restrictions just because some people won't comply with the, so far, double dose, and that I think we are going to need to have a national conversation about the way forward and the other things that we can do to protect those who are hard to reach. And he put it in terms of doing other things to protect those who refuse to comply, whatever the reason they have. And he talked about moving away from NPIs, moving away from non-pharmaceutical interventions. The exact same conversation that EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen wants to have in the European Union. This is despite evidence in the UK care sector that making it compulsory had almost zero effect, even though tens of thousands of care workers were sacked as a result. Now, what will this so-called national conversation consist of? What form will it take? And how will the decision be reached? Or has the conversation already taken place by the people that matter? And has the conclusion already been reached? Has the decision been made? Is this talk about a national conversation just a way of giving it a micron-thick veneer of democracy? But first you have to consider countries that have already made the autocratic decision to do this. How many lobbyists from how many related companies within the industrial sector concerned are now lining up to flaunt their offerings in front of ministers in the hope that their wares will also be added to the compulsory list? And big tech companies will also be aware that this sort of mandatory programme requires a robust database, ready to expand with mission creep. The holding of all that personal information, potentially including DNA information. And then there's all that tracking hardware, so the commodity units, the people, can be given permission to leave their homes, allowed into shops, allowed into football games, allowed into parks, etc., etc., etc. Just let that sink in for a moment. The whole political and industrial landscape would pivot, almost overnight, into a vast undertaking whose only aim is to control people based on an ever-growing list of compliance, an ever-burgeoning list of establishment demands, all for your health and safety, of course. And you will be grateful for the ever-growing surveillance. And for those who think this could never happen, I say you are either naive or deluded or in denial, or you are a part of it. And think back a couple of years to the ridicule heaped upon those who said that exactly this scenario would unfold. But how would this national conversation go in the UK? Well, it's already started. The division on social media between the compliant and non-compliant started weeks ago, and it began officially in England last night when the PM uttered the words national conversation. He's going to make out it was our idea as a collective. But the collective will not be formed from a true national conversation, because on this matter a collective decision will never be formed. It is too divisive and crosses too many red lines for far too many people. I fear that the only way the powers that be can get this moved along to what they see as a successful outcome of mass compliance is to ensure people are terrified of not being compliant. But not on health or moral grounds, but on the fear of the immediate repercussions on them and their family of non-compliance. The fear that their paperwork might not be in proper order. Fear that their commute, bus or train may be denied to them, or that their holiday abroad gets cancelled by an algorithm. Media will be more than happy to push this one-sided narrative. The BBC will be deployed. BBC One question time panels will be ready loaded. Just look at the concerns that travellers have right now as they progress through the airports, the checks, the tests, the form filling, and for some the quarantines. A constant roundabout of ever-changing administrative hurdles for us to trip over. Is this really how we want to live our lives forevermore? And can you imagine one day waking up to a text message ordering you to stay at home because the computer upgrade they did last night corrupted part of the database your details are on, and retrieving the backup is taking longer than normal, so you must stay at home, otherwise your safety cannot be assured. Now, such a national conversation would be extremely divisive across the whole of England. But it won't be a conversation, because one side will be shut down in the press and social media. One side will be ridiculed as nutters. One side will be ridiculed as anti-science. One side will be depicted as the ones that will have a future full of fun, and the other side will be depicted as having consigned themselves to a future of misery and restrictions. There will be only one true narrative, and only that one true narrative will be allowed. And anyone going against that one true narrative will be cancelled and shut down. Think not? Well, they did exactly that to a previous US president, and it was an extremely successful exercise for them. But this time in England there will be no plebiscite on the matter. There will be no vote, no referendum. It takes up to a year and a half to organise one of those, well, to organise it properly anyway. And time is far too tight for that. It would have to be decided by the PM sticking his finger in the air and deciding what the national mood is after the national conversation. All based on newspapers and pollsters. And as an example of this, here's what Julia Hartley-Brewer of Talk Radio tweeted out about last night's Plan B decision by Boris. Today's decision to impose Plan B was made by the Quad, PM, Sunak, Javid, Barclay. The Cabinet were only told of the decision in a phone call afterwards. There was not even a hint at Cabinet meeting on Tuesday that Plan B was even being considered. This is theatre, not science. These decisions are not even made under the cover of Cabinet collective responsibility these days. But that none of the other ministers has resigned over this yet shows how deeply our democracy has been damaged over the last 18 months, and probably a lot longer than that. Hartley-Brewer went on to say in the Twitter thread, "Ministers were not asked by the PM to agree to Plan B, they were simply told about it." Exactly. No meaningful vote in Parliament about it either. And no wonder Tory backbench MPs are getting hot under the collar about this. But that's of no consequence, because Labour will back the Tory imposition of ever more restrictions to the hilt. And they will enjoy the Tory party split over it in the process. But although everyone's giving Boris a hard time about Plan B and Christmas parties, which ministers or MPs have come forward to condemn Boris's so-called national conversation on this? 3 weeks to flatten the curve has become 2 years to total control. That's all it took, just 2 years. So what's your opinion on this national conversation? Please like and comment below. Please subscribe and like this video, buy a mug and support me on Patreon or PayPal, and thank you for watching.